because this is a regrets motions are going to be analyzing the already existing like harms and benefits that have already occurred like as a product of the core curriculum. And we're going to define the core curriculum as graduation requirements that all students must complete regardless of what major they choose. So for example, if you're a liberal arts major, you're going to be forced to take things like biology, calculus, written literature. You're going to take a bunch of classes of like a large variety so that you get a core curriculum. Like think about it like similar to high school, right? Like in high school, you have to take like history, you have to take science, you have to take math, you have to take literature. So what we're going to be looking at is something that is very similar to like a high school sort of concept. Okay, on framework, we're going to be doing a net benefits framework. So whatever side poses like the most harms or benefits of a curriculum is going to win this debate today. And so on our contention, so our first contention is about pursuing your passion, right? Our subpoint A is that you have the freedom to choose classes. So like rather than be restricted to a specific uniform set of classes, we need to recognize that all students have different sets of skills which cannot be brought out to their fullest potential like through a core curriculum. For example, a core curriculum is very, very time consuming, right? Because if you are a liberal arts major, you have to take things like biology, you have to take a math class, and those are things that you're not willing to pursue. I want to point out that like if you're going to liberal arts or if you're existing as like an adult in this type of school, you're not going to need the knowledge you get from biology. You're not going to need the knowledge that you get from calculus, which is why the core curriculum is so helpful, because the knowledge you get from it is completely unnecessary. Like if you ask your parent, like when they graduated from college, like when have you needed to use calculus on day-to-day basis, they're not going to tell you like they're going to say nothing because calculus is like not necessary. So the thing is like we want people to pursue things that they're actually interested in and things that are like good life skills for them, which is why like a core curriculum is completely unnecessary. But also subpoint B is that you have more time for internships, right? Like you can achieve a higher level in your passion if your time is not wasted spending on things that you don't need, right? So like for example, if you have like 4 classes in a day and like 2 of them are like, I don't know, biology or calculus, right? And you're not interested in that, that takes time away from like doing an internship on liberal arts, which is something you want to pursue. So then if you have time for an internship, you can pursue your passion A, but you also like can build your resume for job opportunities, right? Like jobs are going to look at like what internships you did in college. And we think that that's like that this time that you have is like really necessary because like college is about preparing yourself for the working world and like building your resume so that when you apply for a job you are ready to do so. But if you have a bunch of like unspecialized random skills, like jobs aren't going to look like if you're applying to be like an artist or a painter, they're not going to look at like your biology degree, right? Like they're not going to look at like all these other classes you take. They're going to be looking at this specialized set, which is why this is like unnecessary and why we need to have this time so people can like pursue their passions. So then our subpoint so then the main impact of this is like it improves your future chances of success, right? Like if you're doing things that you're more passionate in, you're more likely to succeed. And this is true because like, if you're like, let's say you're really passionate in debate, for example, like you're going to attend all of the debate tournaments because that's what you love to do. So you're going to work and you're going to get better. And because you have the time to do this, you have the ability to attend more debate tournaments, for example. But if you're stuck taking classes you don't want to take, then you don't have this time at the end of the day. But like, let's say I really like debate, right? Like I could do a debate internship. I can do all of these things in college because I don't have all of this time that is being wasted spending on things that like I don't want to do. Okay, and our second point is on mental health, right? Like we have a lot of classes that don't match a student's skill set. So if a student is really bad at math, for example, like they get a lot of stress, they get a lot of anxiety from it because math, regardless of like what kind of math you're taking, can be very rigorous if you are not like suited to it. Like same thing goes if you're like a STEM student who's taking English. Like classes that don't match your skill set can become very, very stressful because you start failing the class, you start doing really, really bad. And so in a core curriculum, if you are forced to take classes, that don't match your skill set, what's going to happen is that like your grades are going to drop and you might not be able to graduate because like you have to get at least a C, to pass your classes. So if you fail, it puts your like entire like career at jeopardy. It puts your entire, college education at jeopardy for something that you don't even want to study at the end of the day. So that's why we think that a core curriculum is bad, right? Because we think that like, you shouldn't be like your entire education shouldn't be risked on the fact that you're taking a class that you don't want to take and your grades in that despite like you not wanting to pursue this in the future. So we don't think that that's like actually good. And also like the importance of this is regardless of what op tells you, like people learn best when they want to learn. And we are harming that desire to learn by telling them what they should be learning, right? So like basically the reason why this impacts your mental health at the end of the day, right, is because these classes are so rigorous and because you don't want to fail, like your mental health is going to start to decline because you're going to put all that pressure on you as an individual. You're going to put all this pressure on you to just pass this one class that you can't actually pass. We think that that's really bad because again it takes away time from like pursuing your passion, but it also also decreases your mental health because you're so focused on passing this one class that doesn't actually matter to you. And so our third impact is on teachers, right? Like students are going to be less engaged in the material they are learning because they are forced to learn it. And so this puts a lot of stress on teachers at universities, right? Like if you're teaching a classroom of kids who don't actually want to learn, like you can't actually, like, first of all, you're going to be stressed out because they're not actually learning anything, right? Like, and it's on the student to actually learn the content. And so like the teachers are going to blame themselves, right? Like if your student is not learning content, or if your student is failing this class, this reflects badly on them, because if you have a classroom full of students who don't actually want to learn, like teachers are not going to be as passionate about teaching their subjects, because like they're going to be like, hey, these people are not engaged in my class, like I don't know how to make it engaging. And like no matter how hard they try, like they can't make it engaging because the students just don't want to learn about the subject. So we think that at the end of the day, like if you don't have a core curriculum, like we think that, the people in the classes are going to be more engaging, and that also creates like a more engaging environment for the students, right? Like when you're surrounded by people who want to learn the same thing as you do and who want to like grow their skill set, like you're going to have a more positive environment for learning, right? Because everyone is supporting each other, everyone is building each other up, and everyone wants to work really hard. But if you have a bunch of people in the class who just don't want to learn the subject because they're not interested in it, you're going to have a more negative atmosphere, because not everyone is focused on like building each other up, like no, because people are like focused in different areas. So we think that, like, this is best for like the environment of learning overall, but like on the teachers, right? Because it's up to the teachers, to provide an engaging environment. But like if a student isn't engaged, like it's not on them at the end of the day. And that also puts their job at risk, because like if you're teaching class and everyone's failing, like that says something about the teacher. Okay, so like let me just briefly say my impacts before my time. And so like our first impact is on like pursuing your passion. We have our subpoint A about like our freedom to choose our classes, subpoint B on more time for internships, and then for mental health. And our second impact is mental health, and our third is an impact on teachers. So proud to affirm. Thank you.
Please give me a second to lower my blind. All right, thanks. We're set.
Zane, you're the one to.
Oh, okay. Hello, Judge. I'm the first speaker for the negation. Just as an off-time roadmap, I'll first be going over our case, reading our two disadvantages. Then I'll be responding to what they said, and just like, yeah. All right, my time starts now. Okay, Judge, we agree with their definitions and the fact that it is weight on net benefits to get something good for this amount of people. And we negate the resolution that the popularity of the core curriculum in colleges and universities. Our first disadvantage is one, breadth of education. Our claim, understanding more levels of knowledge is key to being able to enrich people, which provides skills necessary in order to progress in the real world. So the core curriculum teaches a set of skills necessary for jobs and future careers. So subjects such as writing, philosophy courses, while seemingly irrelevant, are actually important to generate important critical thinking skills that are incredibly valuable to employers. So philosophy studies, for example, makes you a better worker when engaging with other people, and writing and English courses make you more fluent at communication in general. It's also uniquely key for colleges to supply these courses because high school students are currently very unprepared and behind on many studies like writings and skills like analysis. So the ACT found that last spring, 49% of high school students it tested could not read at the level of college freshman texts, and 90% of college professors thought high school students were not well prepared in reading, writing, and doing research. The same is true for other studies like math, science, etc. So research is a very necessary part of college, as employers are much more likely to hire people with research skills. So the core courses guarantee that much better. So like these courses that you take in high school, for example, they don't teach at the same level, and they're not actually the students aren't able to get that same level as they would in college. So this is bad because 72% of employers feel like critical thinking is key to their organization's success. So they need these skills regardless. Furthermore, having a more educated population is inherently good because better problem solvers and critical thinkers are generally good for having competent workers and innovators in their respective fields. So educated people are more prone to self-improvement and becoming a better person in general. Education is the most important factor in resolving poverty as well, because multiple studies find that education is the strongest predictor of social mobility, which basically means rising classes and escaping poverty. So education is inherently good for the world and for our societies. So the impacts of this are one, innovation, which leads to better quality of life due to new technologies and research, which is key at a time where issues like climate change and permafrost are on the rise. So obviously we need good research to check back for these extinction level scenarios, and not having breadth of education courses doesn't allow for this same level of research and innovation that is happening and that needs to take place. Also, for example, research is a part of English. So like to argue that research isn't actually being taught is false. So also, as we talked before, it leads to less poverty, as people who graduate are much more more likely to get hired and get employed. And this is really important since poverty is extremely dehumanizing. It forces people to choose between things like medicine and food, and literally has been found to shorten life expectancy by 15 years. Also, people in poverty tend to stay in poverty, with each year in poverty making it less and less likely to leave. Our second disadvantage is structural violence. The claim core courses often include courses like comparative religion or ethnic study courses, which can be incredibly important in generating tolerance for minorities and being more culturally accepting. So for example, when we look at general core courses, one of the core courses that many colleges such as UC Berkeley require is ethnic studies, which is key to understanding the struggles of minorities like Black, Brown, and Indigenous individuals. So results from a study show that people who study ethnic studies graduate at a rate about 20% higher than non-ethnic studies majors. And ethnic studies is also key to critical race theory, which is super important as direct critical race theory is being banned in the status quo by the government. So ethnic studies is an important way to access this. So absent the core curriculum, most people would purely focus on their major, which is bad because it makes it impossible for graduates to actually generate these skills which combat structural violence, especially at a time where racism is super high with anti-Black police violence, anti-Middle Eastern rhetoric, and policies that literally dehumanize women such as Roe v. Wade. These courses are uniquely key. So impacts of this obviously are less structural violence, and more graduates, and just which leads to less poverty and better quality of life in general. Also, racism is the largest impact, of course, is high in both probability and magnitude, and is an ethical priority to reject racism. So systemic racism means that it accumulates over time and is intergenerational, outweighing extinction or other high magnitude impacts because it affects multiple instances of the world's population. Racism also kills value to life by rendering populations as disposable, which is an extinction level impact. Racist policy has the highest probability of causing general dehumanization, as we said before. So for example, slavery and Jim Crow laws, while abolished, still affect us today. Even one policy affected one generation has future dehumanizing implications. So I'll now be going over what they said in their speech. So the first contention is pursuing passion. Just as an overview, if we want to get jobs in these passions, we need to be able to have the right courses in order to generate critical thinking skills. So like obviously, just because you're not like specified in that like sort of core curriculum course, these skills are necessary to have jobs in the specified field in the future. So despite what they say, yes, you will need biology and calculus for liberal arts because calculus literally studies change, which is important for statistics research in liberal arts. And biology knowledge can be used in activism for women's rights. So it still has a direct effect on like your specified field, despite what they may say. Also, there are art colleges, there are trade schools that you can take if you really do not want to take these sort of courses and you know that you won't pay attention in these courses. So trade schools exist that already solve for the affirmation, and core curriculum controls the success in the future, because no matter how much of a how good you are at math, if you can't write your reports well, English classes, etc., you won't study in your you won't succeed in your field. So yeah, these courses are important, obviously, as I mentioned before. Yeah, they mentioned that it builds resume for job opportunities and that you don't need these courses for the resume or whatever. You don't, and the main argument was that you don't have enough time, so then you can like build up your resume through like internships and whatnot. And you don't need to spend that much time on these core courses, despite what it may seem like, because if you take them pass or no pass, then you will be much less stressed and likely to pursue courses. So they made this a big argument about how like they're stressing out over their grades, and that they're gonna like be stressed out over these courses, and they're not gonna it's gonna like overshadow their specified course. But if you take a pass or no pass course, then you won't have these like same struggles. It'll be less stressful. They mentioned that you can't take can't take internships with core curriculum courses. This is empirically untrue because even despite these core courses in the status quo, so many people are still taking internships. As little as 67% of 2013 college graduates completed at least one internship, and 32% completed 2 or more internships. Also, studies show that if you're not picking up at least one internship, you're already behind nearly 70% of your classmates. So obviously, the fact that the idea that like you can't take an internship with your core courses is completely false. They also mentioned mental health as one of the contentions. So this is if you once again, as I said before, if you take a pass-fail course, then you're not going to be nearly as stressed out and doesn't take a toll on your mental health. The third contention was teachers. We can turn this because if you remove core courses, many professors will have less students in their classrooms, which means they get paid less. And it also just creates less jobs in general. So teachers will be more likely to lose their jobs with less people in their classes, as I mentioned before. And there will just be less job opportunities for teachers in general, as less jobs available for teachers without the core curriculum. Oh yeah, so my time is up. But for all these reasons, vote negation.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So if everyone's ready, then I will begin. Judges, let me start by making a kind of a metaphor first. So what would happen if we took all of the doctors of our world and forced them to become lawyers instead? What would happen if we took all the lawyers of our world and forced them to become firefighters instead? Like, this is a metaphor, but it is the same with the core curriculum. We are forcing people to explore the wrong subjects, and as a result, we are doing a disservice to education. And so I will first prove this with refutation. So opposition talks about first about giving more levels of knowledge on in their world and providing these key necessary skills. But the thing is, well, first I'd like to make kind of an observation here that passion is important. So for example, like there's a lot of examples, for example, like sports and wars or something like that, where you can see that motivation or like, I mean, in wars like nationalism perhaps, that motivation is a surprisingly significant impactor on how well any group of people perform. And so connecting this to the idea of education, like we can assume that there is a significant impact when students are more motivated to learn and to take these classes versus when they're not motivated to do so. And so with that in mind, for example, when opposition mentions classes like in writing or etc., if you're not motivated in the subject of writing, then you're just not going to learn as much. You're going to write just because someone else told you, not because you want to, and so you won't want to. And so also multiple classes can also teach you the same skills. So like for example, you can still have some form of writing and learn writing in, for example, a science class, but if you're inclined more to science and not to writing, then that's the better option there. And that's something that comes when you have less restrictions, not when you don't have the core curriculum and you can explore the interests that you prefer rather than what someone else tells you to do. And like, we agree that education is good. Like that's overall a good impact, but the impacts that opposition outlines here about like social mobility and critical thinking and things like that are things that happen when you want to learn. Like, as I mentioned at the top of this refutation, I've had times where I've been engaged in class and times where I just wanted it to be over. And like, you can guess which one I absorbed more information in. It was the classes where I was engaged in class and where I actually cared to learn the information. And so the impact of education here actually goes to our side because we don't force people to choose. And I mean, the opposition, I'll mention it in my defense, but like the opposition doesn't really kind of acknowledge this idea that motivation is such a big factor. And without it, a lot of students don't stand to learn nearly as much in education. And so in terms of the idea of more levels of knowledge, as this overhead contention is, the government side actually provides more levels and more depth to students' education because we actually make students care about what they're learning. And as a result, they absorb that information better. And then second, the opposition talks about a sort of structural violence contention here. Like, I mean, I believe they mentioned things about like ethnic studies classes and stuff. So like people want to take these courses if it improves their graduation rates. Like when people see this, they might be interested, but also if you're not interested in learning about these kinds of studies, about ethnic studies in general, it's likely, like just like the main idea I mentioned in the first refutation, it's likely that you might not get anything from this class because you just don't want to listen. And so I kind of in the same vein here, the government side is overall better here so far because we just allow people to be more passionate in whatever they're learning. And so the people, and so every person, like regardless of what passions they have, are free to explore those passions. They'll want to learn more. And as a result, all kinds of fields are going to be impacted in a beneficial way because you have a lot more enthusiasm in all of those fields. And then I could also prove that through my dissent as well. So first, our first contention on government side was about pursuing passions and things like that, which is kind of connected to like your physical well-being, your future success, economic success potentially as well. And so like here the opposition talks about these critical thinking skills and how you need these skills. But and opposition keeps mentioning this, but it's kind of an assumption they're making here that only select subjects foster critical thinking, where in reality, all topics can promote critical thinking, but only if you want to critically think. And if you're simply not the kind of person that has a preference for computer science or something like that, then you would just not develop those skills in as strong of a way if you're required to take a class like that. I mean, it depends on what the core curriculum is, but just the point is that if you're not motivated in your class and you're being forced to take those classes, then you're not going to develop critical thinking. And so government is better because we don't force that on people and we allow people to actually explore the subjects they want to critically think in and develop those skills in. And I mean, here also I believe here also, oh, sorry. So freedom to choose, it was one of the points that we made under this contention. So like all students have different sets of skills, we established that, and like we aren't a society made of clones or robots or something. So we need to promote the ability to learn because that comes before like all of these ideas of like practical knowledge, because regardless of what kind of practical knowledge you're learning about, ultimately all of that boils down to how motivated you are to learn whatever material you're learning about. And so promoting enthusiasm for learning is that very important impact. And that's what government is doing. We're promoting the potential in people by allowing them more freedom to choose what they want. And as a result of this idea of enthusiasm and like fostering a love for learning, this kind of also connects to the impact of education. And that kind of allows us to access those benefits because by promoting enthusiasm for learning, we are making people more likely to absorb the information they're learning in education. And so we are better for education overall. And then also my partner mentions the idea of internships, like as an example of how these restrictions ultimately hold people back from achieving a high level of success, not only in education, but also in terms of future success, like your physical well-being and all of that, and like economic potential. And then it's also like, so it's also like time consuming. So it takes away time from things that a student may actually care about, which doesn't actually improve chances of good success. And that can be very stressful, which kind of leads me to my second contention about mental health. And so here, I believe around here is where the opposition talks about how like you don't need to spend so much time on these core courses and you can take them pass or no pass or something like that. But some of these classes, like it's really hard to pass math classes or like chemistry classes, for example. Like this leads to a lot of stress and you can't actually focus on what you actually care about because all you care about is getting that pass or no pass, especially if you don't have an inclination to those areas. That actually makes it a lot more stressful. And like, for example, core classes also put an emphasis on standardized testing too. And so all of these factors combine into a very stressful environment that is further enhanced by the fact that many of these students don't even have the passion to learn in these core classes. And so ultimately, what we're going to end up with in this contention that I mentioned is that when people are not happy with what they're doing, they tend to do that thing worse. So we're better off. I mean, so we're worse off as a society as a result, and we're also worse off if we're looking at an individual at a mental health perspective, like not just their future success or their physical like well-being, but also their mental well-being because they're just not into it. And then thirdly, also talking about like the teachers, just to quickly touch on this, like teachers are more likely to keep their jobs if they have students actually motivated to learn, that actually care to learn, that actually do well in that class. And that is a societal impact because teachers when we have better teachers that are motivated to learn, that be motivated to learn and teach passionate students, then ultimately we have a better society as a result. So Judge, you should vote for government because we do better for the individual and for society as a whole. Thank you, Judge.
there we go. Okay, the order is, this had one, actually there'll be an overview at the top. It'll be kind of like responding to their metaphorical overview. And then this had two. And then the top down. Cool. Okay. All right, if everybody's ready, time starts now. Overview. The negative is the status quo, because right now in the status quo, we already see that people are taking core courses. We see that the status quo is also perfectly fine, as right now people are graduating and being educated just fine. So all of the affirmative arguments are purely based on incredibly nebulous scenarios, because they keep talking about things about how people will have no motivation to learn, when in the status quo, this is like people are still being able to graduate and these teachers are completely losing their jobs. Moreover, this probably responds to their metaphor about how we're forcing doctors to become firefighters, because we're not forcing them to become firefighters. We're just forcing doctors to learn some important skills. And also, like, who knows, maybe the doctor needs to put out a fire. And then secondarily, we would also say a lot of the responses on our case are super defensive, because they just keep talking about how they won't be able to absorb everything because they won't be completely interested. That's fine. Even if we win a risk that they're at least somewhat interested, that itself is enough, because that's net beneficial to a world where there's no interest at all. Especially in a world where people won't be able to even learn about these critical thinking skills, that means that that is a world in which people lose important skills like research, which is important to pursuing your passion. That means any risk of the disadvantage also turns their entire case, because if you aren't learning critical skills that are also important to your own major, then that means that you won't be able to even get jobs. So that means that any risk of the negative is prior. I guess try or die, I don't know. Okay, on to that one. They say that motivation is a surprisingly significant impact. That's cool, but motivation doesn't just decrease because you're taking a course that's not directly in your major. Judge, the affirmative assumes that everybody is so narrow-minded that they only want to focus on their own major. The simple warrant for this is that only focusing on your own major also leads to a lot of saturation. The warrant for this is medical school, in which literally if you look to a lot of medical school people, they are so burnt out because they are literally 8 hours a day, they're focusing on nothing but medicine. And by the way, if they try to say that, oh, okay, well then adding breadth courses to medical school would make it worse, that's not true, because we're only talking about undergraduate courses, like not medical school, but I don't think they're going to make that response, whatever. But yeah, in any case, we say that in medical school, literally people are so saturated focusing on only their subject. It's intellectually stimulating for them to focus on other things as well. Judge, they literally talk about, actually, never mind. Yeah, and then they're just saying that if you're not motivated in the subject of writing, you're not going to learn. We would say that, yes, you will be motivated in the subject of writing, because one important part of things like STEM majors is learning how to communicate your results, learning how to argue for your stance in research. Otherwise, nobody's going to buy your paper. And this is literally why so many research conferences have panels that are also criticizing how you present your information. If that is not, then that means that that is probably intellectually stimulating, because it means that learning about other ways to present your own research can help you get intellectually stimulated, which means that you're definitely not going to be, you're definitely going to have at least some motivation, which means all their arguments don't really make any sense. Moreover, we would say that you haven't proven that people don't want to learn at all. Again, people aren't narrow-minded. We say that learning about a wide variety of things is intellectually stimulating because it proves how you can like connect multiple subjects across each other. For example, learning about historical knowledge in like ethnic studies can also connect to math, like learning about like Black mathematicians or like indigenous mathematicians who are like really important, and like learning about like how we can better increase diversity in math in order to better like gain more people in math. I don't know. And like in that sense, that probably shows you that at least in these types of subjects, you can learn more and you can at least connect them, which increases your chance of getting hired. We've given you so many words about how high school courses aren't enough. That's the uniqueness, which means that college is necessary and in order to learn this course. And if at the point where they have not even refuted the fact that these core courses are key to research, that means that you can extend across that entire argument. That's going to outweigh any argument that they go for, because we tell you 72% of employers feel critical thinking is key to their organization's success, which means if 72% of employers won't even hire you, then that massively outweighs you not having some interest, or you not getting like slightly more stress, even though we're going to prove that you're not going to get that much stress, because stress is a very intangible, like, okay, well, we would say that the affirmatives impacts are super intangible. They just kind of say that, oh, okay, people won't be as like they won't be graduating as good a rate. But we have a statistic, a hard rock statistic, that 72% of employers, which probably is much more important than Again, a lot of their arguments are just about promoting the potential of people. You're not promoting the potential of people, because even if they're pursuing their passion, they get saturated. And if they're getting saturated, that's super bad, because it means that they'll eventually get super burned out, like that happens in medical school, which probably turns the entirety of your stress contention, which means at that point, because we cleanly win access to this link on research, it means that we get access to our impact on poverty. We would say that this probably outweighs their link on poverty, because they just say that people won't graduate at as higher a rate. We would say that people won't even graduate people won't even be able to earn a job in the first place in our world, specifically because like it'll be incredibly hard, as 3/4 of jobs will literally reject you. We would say that that probably outweighs on magnitude as well as probability, because the probability that an employer will feel like you don't like the probability that I'll take it at the end. The probability that an employer rejects you simply because you don't have an internship is much lower than the probability that an employer rejects you because you don't have literal critical thinking skills. Moreover, you can also extend the response that in the status quo there are internships. People are able to do other things, which means all their arguments about internships don't really make any sense. And you can extend the innovation impact. This links into extinction, because we tell you that like innovation and new technologies are key to creating better researchers. Core courses are creating better researchers, which is key at a time of climate change and permafrost. That's an extinction level impact, so it outweighs on magnitude. On structural violence, they have lost the debate by literally not covering structural violence at all. They just say one response about interest, and then they don't even touch the entire rest of the disadvantage. As we've positioned, you have not proven that people won't have any interest at all. Ethnic studies are definitely important, and the historical knowledge of ethnic studies is something that is common to like a lot of majors, especially as we've proven with math, which means any risk of this disadvantage outweighs their entire case. This is further damning where they drop the weighing on the impacts, the weighing which we've shown you that is the largest impact, because it's highest in probability and magnitude. It's ethical a priori, because debaters are underrepresented. Minorities are underrepresented in the debate space, so it's much more urgent to try solve for it. And we also tell you it's intergenerational, which means that it affects more and more policies, and it outweighs on like long-term long-term severity, because it means it's going to happen for more and more generations. We could be the warrant of slavery and Jim Crow laws, like how that racist policy even affects people today, which means it is a try or die for the disadvantage to be able to solve for all of that, because only if you have a study in which people are properly focusing on ethnic studies and properly learning the things that they need to, that you can solve for this high magnitude, high probability impact that is an ethical a priori to reject. Don't let them respond to this weighing of the 1AR, and which basically means we already win this debate, because it's literally the largest impact as they've conceded, and it's probably like an impact that we win complete access to, because they only have defense. Okay, on AF, sorry. Again, we've already responded to their overview, but also extend our argument on their first advantage that you will need biology and calc for liberal arts studies. Calculus literally studies change, which is important for statistics research, and biology knowledge can be used for activism and women's rights. This turns their contention, because it means pursuing your own passion will be better if you know about other studies and how it relates to your own studies. If you don't know about that, then you're inevitably going to fail in everything you do, which means that probably turns all their impacts and means they don't get access to this. Extend our internships response, that takes out their internship offense. On mental health, we've already added a new turn on saturation, which probably turns all their offense, because if they get saturated, people will literally be much more stressed. And also extend the pass-fail solves their offense, which means our link on saturation outweighs their link on like stress with more courses, because at least with because at least we have some defense on their link. Also on their final contention, extend a response that teachers will be more likely to lose their jobs because there's less people in their classes. This outweighs, because motivation versus like actually having a job. Okay.
Okay, so I think I'll not be doing the voter speech for the negation. And yeah, so I'll just first be like trying to like summarize the round, and then just like doing some impact weighing and stuff, and then talking about how negation wins this debate. And so my time starts now. Okay, Judge. So the biggest thing you need to understand is that core curriculums exist in the status quo. So all their arguments saying that they won't be able to take internships, or oh, they will fail their classes and teachers will be stressed because all their students are failing. So in the status quo, this is just not true, because as we proved before, students are still able to take internships in the status quo, and that most college students do take internships, or they won't be able to get these jobs. So to like say that it's like it can't happen, or it's not true, is like completely false. Also, teachers, as we talked about before, just teachers losing their jobs due to a lack of students and people not being in their class clearly outweighs. Because for example, if they made it so it wasn't required, then people wouldn't be taking their classes, and they wouldn't like they would have no students in the class and they wouldn't have these jobs. They would lose their jobs because these classes don't exist anymore. So lots of professors will have less students in their classroom, which means they get paid less in general, even if those jobs still exist. So all this clearly outweighs also to argue that like everyone fails their class is just completely false, because teachers can have their class to the capabilities of their class. So they make sure that the class isn't designed for everyone to fail, because they wouldn't want that. And so this exists in the status quo. So this argument is false. And so all of our disadvantages still flow through, because we get breadth of education, because in the status quo everyone is getting more classes in general, and they're not just failing every class, and they're still absorbing this information in this class. They keep talking about how there's no motivation, but the motivation is still there. Motivation doesn't decrease just because you so this motivation is still there because they're trying to pass the class or whatever. They're trying to pass the class, so that they're obviously going to be motivated to pass this class, and they're going to take this class and absorb this information. So all this critical thinking is still there because it's an essential part of the course. It's just in the course that and to pass the class proves that they're taking in this information. So we're getting this breadth of education still. So these impacts of innovation and research still flow through, because the breadth of courses is still there. And we also get less poverty, as we talked about before. Also, a disadvantage about structural violence still flows through, because they're taking these ethnic studies courses and they're passing them, so they are still absorbing this information, which of course leads to less racism, which is the largest impact, as we talked about before. So if we were to look at, if we were to compare our impacts, they have like this extremely defensive case saying that like, oh, people won't be motivated when they're taking these classes, and so they don't get any education. No, we proved before that they do. They're still motivated because they're actively trying to pass the class, and so they are absorbing information. And it's also accessible because there's a pass-fail scenario. There are pass-fail classes. So yeah, so we are getting breadth of education, and we are we are getting less racism in general because of structural violence, less structural violence, and obviously, and we're getting better innovation and better research, and less poverty in general. So all these impacts, in our case, still flows through. Whereas their case, they have next to nothing. They just say that like, oh, they'll be more focused on their specified courses, but in the status quo, they're still taking these courses and the specified courses at the same time. So like the whole analogy about the doctors and firefighters, as we talked before, is just like it's false and doesn't make sense. We're just giving them some life skills that they need to exceed and succeed in the future with their future jobs, and to be able to get these future jobs, because they're getting these life skills and important skills on their resume. So with all this in mind, vote negation.
Okay, is everyone ready? Okay, so just off time roadmap, I'm gonna start off with like one big observation, and then I'm gonna go ahead into weighing points. Okay, so the difference between SciGov and SciNeg is that on SciGov we offer you a choice. SciNeg tells us that we have to defend, people like taking classes strictly in our own major. This is not true. All SciGov has to prove is that like all we do is we offer a choice. So like let's look back at the definition of core curriculum, right? Like it's a set of requirements that people need in order to pass. So we tell you that like, so let's say you're a doctor and you want to take a creative writing class. We say like, good for you, by all means do that. And the thing is, you are able to do that on SciGov, but the reason why SciNeg falls short is because these students have to fulfill these structural requirements. So let's say, like, for example, take me for example, I want to do like policy in my future, but I'm also interested in psychology, but psychology doesn't like fall under the policy bridge. I can take a psychology class on our side of the world, but the thing is like on their side of the world, I can't take this psychology class because I have to fulfill my requirements for like econ, I have to fulfill my requirements for gov. So what I'm saying here is that like the thing is like, if people want to take things outside of their major, they can on our side of the world. Variety is not something that is mutually exclusive. Like I said before, like if you're a doctor and you want to take a creative writing class, you can do that on our side of the world. But the thing is, on SciNeg is you have to follow this strict set of requirements that requires you to take all of these really core classes that you have to take. So what we're saying is that we offer like freedom of choice. We offer like being able to do whatever you want to do. And so like SciNeg misconstrues this greatly. Okay, so like let's go ahead into like the weighing point. So they give you this big weighing point about like learning critical thinking and learning new skills. And they give you this major statistic about how like, 72% of employers are like looking at critical thinking. First of all, critical thinking is not exclusive to just like taking a variety of classes. You can prove critical thinking by just pursuing your major, right? Like you have to do something that demonstrates. Yeah.
This is a new argument that responds to the critical thinking. This was never.
Okay, so I don't think
you guys brought up the statistic after our second speech. Was that?
you brought it up in like member. Okay, disregard that.
Well,
but
all the judges will take it into consideration.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Okay, regardless of whether or not you buy that's a new point, it's still like the thing is like we still have this overarching point about like how you're going to be more motivated to learn things like if you're actually interested in what you're learning. The problem with side op is that they require you to take these fundamental classes, and so like not a lot of people are interested in these fundamental classes. For example, like let's talk about like their structural violence, but like their ethnic studies. We tell you that like you're only going to get takeaways from certain classes if you're interested in learning. Like for example, like let's say you're taking this class and you just want it to end because you don't like the way that it's being taught, then you're not actually going to take anything away from it. You're probably going to be playing solitaire in the back of the classroom. You're not actually going to be able to learn anything from this class. So we say that like on side gov, the impact is that you get to choose what you want to take, so that you won't be playing solitaire in the back of the class, that you can actually like learn how to do things. You can actually learn critical thinking. You can actually like participate in these skills, so because you don't have to take this fundamental set of courses. So like we tell you, we do have variety on our side of the house. We do have this variety because you could just take whatever you want to take, because people are going to want to take psychology. People are going to want to take the fun classes. So we tell you that we also offer variety, but we offer a better kind of variety.
Point of order.
Yeah.
Sorry. Actually, I think all of the choice analysis might be new in the 1AR, because like I don't think you explicitly responded to the fact that like the disadvantage is like necessary in order to ensure people take these courses. Like
okay, I can like point under judge's discretion, but like if I could point it on the flow where like Derek kind of
sure, yeah, you can.
Yeah. So like under his motivation, he talks about it, like he gives you examples about like like STEM students and like how they think it's super stressful. Like Derek, do you want to point it out?
He like doing my reputation.
Yeah. Like
yeah,
he talks about like under like this motivation point, he gives like little sub-analysis as like why like you're not motivated because you don't get to choose, but like it doesn't matter that much.
Okay.
Okay. So anyways. Okay, sorry, let me just like go back onto my flow. Okay, so like anyways, let's talk about this like mental health point though. So like we win this so like actually like let's talk about like this learning skills point. Like we have a higher probability of learning skills because people are motivated to choose like whatever they want to choose, and people are motivated because of like the classes they want to take. But also we win mental health point on probability as well. So they give us a lot of like pass and fail analysis, but we tell you that like pass fail classes are also still really stressful, right? Like we tell you that like it is really hard to pass like a biology college class. Like for example, I'm taking like AP biology right now, and like it is really hard for me to just pass this class like in general. Like I got a 39% on my last test, so it is really hard to even meet the bare minimum requirements at the end of the day. So we tell you that like this pass fail analysis flows under our side of the house at the end of the day, because we tell you that like just simply passing and failing is really bad, because you're not limited to like because you're not limited to your skill set. Like we tell you that if you're taking things that you're not good at the end of the day and you don't want to take, you're going to fail, and ultimately like that jeopardizes your college career. Like what they do is they overlook our like weighing analysis as like how failing one class can like jeopardize like your college experience, right? Like you have to pass all of your core curriculum classes in order to graduate, and what this does is it creates immense stress for students, because if they're just struggling in this one biology class, right, like they're not going to be able to like get their degree, because you have to in order to get a degree you have to pass all of your classes. So that stresses you out, and biology is not something that like you might want to even go into like in the future. Okay, so like let's just take like a broad like overview of what I just talked about here. So like the reason why you want to vote for SideGov is like on this learning new skill set point. Like we tell you that we offer this choice. We tell you that like side op restricts you to these fundamental requirements. We also tell you like our analysis about like motivation, right? Like you're going to be more willing to learn new things because of this motivation. You're going to be willing to learn new things because you choose to learn, and not because you're sitting in the back of the class and not listening. And we also win on mental health. Like we tell you that like even passing and failing is incredibly difficult, and that puts people under immense stress. We tell you that if you're struggling to pass these classes, we tell you that you're more likely to be stressed out on the side of the house. So proud to affirm. Thank you.
The AP bioanalysis was so real.
It was real, actually. Even from the bottom of my heart.
Okay. Good round. No, that was really fun.
Yeah,
Very
this was
nice
so
round.
Yeah,
fun.
good
It was so
round.
nice meeting you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So judges, will you like take some time to deliberate, then disclose, or?
Yeah, I'm gonna go off camera, mute myself, and then
Okay.
we can disclose once everyone is all done.
Sounds good.
Hi, is Judge Kalapala still in the room?
Yeah, I'm here.
Would you please submit a ballot with your
Oh.
decision? You should have a tab room ballot. You just need to submit win or loss. And we only have 15 minutes to the next round. Thank you.
Looks like the results are out.
Connor, do you want to go ahead and announce the?
Yeah. So it was a 3-0 decision for the opposition. I guess I can kind of start with my RFD. I think that ultimately I sided with the negation primarily on just kind of the squo solving arguments. I think what is extended through the MO and the voters is the idea that people right now are taking these internships. And so I thought that there was some risk with some kind of change to a status quo without core curriculum that would reflect negatively in the job market and lead to more poverty. I think my decision became more difficult after the voters because I didn't get as much kind of extension of some of the key impacts that I would have liked to see. I think that specifically the oversaturation turns were like a really crucial part of the MO that kind of turned AF case that wasn't kind of brought through voter speeches. And it was also a bit difficult. I thought that the AF voter strategy was sound, but it was also a bit challenging because I felt like a lot of the stuff was new or borderline new. I kind of had a tough time figuring out how to evaluate the initial framing about options and the affirmation essentially offering a choice. I don't think it really factored in that much because even if I bought that the framing that students having a choice is new, it wasn't kind of clearly explicitly stated that like this is going to lead to a world where you have students who need to develop a lot of different skills. So students in social sciences who need to learn some kind of statistics, calculus, learning that, or people who need to learn how to communicate in science fields, doing that. It isn't super clear how maybe that solves for a lot of the other arguments. And also the pass-fail argument flows through from the negation side on the mental health. And so with that being kind of the impact that the final AF voter focused on, I ultimately didn't really flow through any particularly high probability of getting those impacts just because I have this consistent narrative coming from the negation that we have pass-fail systems in place that will mean that people won't spend too much time on the class. We don't have a whole lot of time, so I guess I'll defer to Nick if you have something more to add.
Yeah, I had obviously voted the same. I came to my decision in a slightly different way. So I wrote a detailed RFD, but I will go through it kind of quickly. So I think there are 3 issues I need to evaluate in the round. The first is like education, career readiness. I think that this actually flows kind of narrowly to Gov. I buy that like all these skills like creative writing and critical thinking writing are important, but they can be gotten in like courses in a major. Like I think a science course can teach you how to write a lab report or something. So I don't necessarily think you need like writing courses to learn writing. So slight edge to get there. Stress, mental health gets to be interesting, a little bit more even-sided. So on one hand, I buy that like taking courses, even pass fail, can be really stressful. I would hate to have to take, breakout rooms are closing really quickly. I'll jump to what I actually made my decision on. Ethnic studies. I think that this is the impacts go unresponded to, and I think, or not dealt with. And I think that the fact that even if people aren't super interested in them, they'll take them because they want to pass them, and they want to, and they won't take them in the gov world. And since that links into the impacts about structural violence, I think it was easy enough to sign my ballot for Rob there. So sorry, it was really quick. Jancy, I'm not sure if you have offer a quick RFD. I know we only have 20 seconds.
Yeah, nothing much to add. For me, it was really the status quo argument that did it for me. I didn't see it like properly addressed. And I think that there could be a lot more impacting down on the government side, but apart from that, it was a really great debate. You can see my detailed RFD in your own time.
Good work, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks to all.
Oh, well done.